Hi guys, good to see you. Jeff gave me a pretty broad topic, so I'm going to wander broadly around the world of wine with you guys today. And I'm calling it the business of wine because it's a very all-encompassing subject. And what I'm going to try to do is help connect the dots on some of the previous speakers and the content that you've already covered, and then expand that into some areas I think that haven't been covered yet about the world of wine. So I was a liberal arts major, University of Washington, Romance languages, very career-oriented focus, no business classes, no accounting classes, and then ended up having a 20-year career in financial services. My travels in that career took me ultimately to Napa Valley. So I got the bug while I was doing that, and ultimately at the age of 40 decided to do a career change and went into wine. So I started in the tasting room, and within 2 years I was managing a winery in Napa Valley. Long story short, I ran a winery in Napa for 10 years, did branding and strategic planning for a luxury food and wine group, and met my husband, who was a crazy winemaker in Napa Valley as well. And we decided we wanted to do our own winery, and after working for other people for 30 years. So we focused on Oregon, cool climate, Pinot Noir and Chardonnay, and in December '04 we bought 128 acres of land up here after selling 10 acres in Napa, so that gives you an idea of what the difference in costs are between Napa Valley and Oregon, and moved up here full-time and started our own vineyard and winery. So co-owner of Brittan Vineyards, and then last January I joined Linfield to help Jeff and some of the other folks who've been working on wine initiatives pull together hopefully a comprehensive wine studies program that we hope is going to start with a minor here, hopefully approved in December by the faculty. This is the mission statement that we have for Linfield's wine program, is to provide a unique interdisciplinary liberal arts approach to wine studies. There are no schools in the country who do a liberal arts approach to wine education. It's either a deep dive into business or it's a deep dive into science, fermentation, viticulture, etc. This would really put Linfield on the map as having something truly unique. All right, the business of wine. If you want to be a winery manager or a winery owner, you need to be able to address all these different aspects. You're in farming, you're in production, you're in finance and accounting, you're having to deal with compliance issues and regulatory issues. You obviously have to do human resources. Anybody who owns a business, especially a small business, has to deal with human resources. Brand development, marketing, sales channel management, hospitality, and customer service. One of the commonalities of the Oregon wine industry is that 75% of us are less than 5,000 cases, and 5,000 cases is a small winery. And this is what we feel like most days. We have so many different things to juggle, it's unbelievable, because you don't have a department for human resources, a department for marketing, a department for sales, a department for finance. You end up doing a lot of it yourself and outsourcing the rest. But there's 3 different ways from a business owner standpoint that you can get, you can deal with the problem of having your raw material. And that is, you can go through the expense of buying a vineyard and farming it yourself. You can lease vineyard land from somebody who has the land but doesn't want to do the farming or take the risk, and then farm it and take the grapes from it. Or the third option is you can buy grapes from somebody who is farming and selling their fruit. So that's just one of the first decisions you have to make when you go into the wine business, is where am I going to get my grapes? Obviously the least expensive and the least cash intensive is to let someone else farm. They take all the risk, they produce the fruit, you buy the fruit and make your wine. So every decision that you make along this track may have a benefit in one side, but it may have a downside on somewhere down the line. So there's a lot of decisions that have to be made, both getting into the business and then once you're in the business. You see here, you have a combination of some lower level and some hillside plantings. I can tell you that of the 700 plus wineries in Oregon, most of the high quality, highly rated fruit is coming from the hillsides. And that's pretty much true in all wine growing regions. The best fruit and the best wines traditionally come from the hillsides, not the top of the hill, not the bottom of the valley, but the slopes. And unfortunately, that's also the most challenging and the most expensive to farm, because you're dealing with hillsides, you're dealing with erosion, you're dealing with a lot of specialty equipment that you have to have. The steeper the hillside, the more difficult it is, the more labor intensive, and the more things you have to do by hand versus by machine. If you're going to get into the wine business, you either have to be a winemaker or you definitely have to hire a winemaker. But you have to understand the grape growing, the viticulture part, because you have to understand your raw material and what's going to impact ultimately the quality of your wine is the quality of your grapes. The expense involved in the equipment in production. I don't know if Anthony talked about that at all, but just those barrels that you see sitting there are French oak barrels. Those cost $1,000 a piece. Most of the tanks, you see a couple in the background, are stainless steel. Stainless steel is very expensive. And the tanks that we like to use for Pinot Noir and for Chardonnay are what we call jacketed or temperature controlled. So not only do you have to pay for this beautiful piece of stainless steel, but you have to pay for the cooling and heating mechanism that wraps around it so that you can control your fermentation temperatures to control the quality of your wine. So every single thing that you do, it's very similar to the cost of anything to do with boats, and that is you're in a caustic environment where there's a lot of moisture and there's a lot of heat, and so you have to have non-corrosive things like stainless steel, just like you do in ships and boats, and everything to do with that is expensive. So, as soon as you open up that can of worms of I'm going to have a winery, I'm going to make wine, and you start buying the equipment, you really start to realize what you're getting yourself into from a cash flow standpoint. It sounds simple from the front end as a business. You get some grapes, you make some wine, you put it in a bottle, you sell it. On the back end, from a financial and accounting standpoint, it's very complicated. And if you have a vineyard and a winery, it's really complicated because there's all kinds of depreciation schedules, cost accounting, etc. I won't delve into that because I'm sure Professor Korb did a much better job than I could. But one of the things that's really critical for managing a winery, so even if I'm not the accountant in the winery, if I'm running a winery, I need to understand all those things, because decisions that we make about planting, about equipment purchases, etc., are all going to impact our bottom line, our tax situation, etc. So even if you're not the accountant, you need to understand all of these things. But wine is extremely difficult to cost out because you're starting, especially if you own your vineyard, you planted your vineyard, your farming costs, then you get the fruit, then you have the production costs in the winery, overhead, etc. Then you have aging costs, barrels, how long it's in barrel, how many times you use the barrel. Then you have packaging, what bottle you're going to put it in, etc., etc. Then you've got bottling costs to actually have the bottling truck come and do that. You have labor costs. Then you take this beautiful bottle of wine you made, and for us, for example, we stick ours in a warehouse for a year before we sell it because it needs to age in the bottle. So 3 years later, I'm releasing a 2012 Pinot Noir in 2015. What did that bottle cost me? It's a very complicated set of formulas. And if you really want to know your products, you need to know what each wine costs. So if you made 10 different wines, they didn't all cost the same to make. Some grapes were more expensive, some aged longer, some less. So just that simple bullet point of cost accounting is a huge issue in the wine industry. You get into the business and you don't realize how cash intensive it's going to be and for how long. So I'm not trying to discourage you, but I'm just saying a lot of people get into the business without really realizing what they're doing. So having a business plan, having cash flow projections, having your ducks in a row, knowing where your financing is coming from is crucial. This is more the fun part. the brand development and marketing. So let's say, you're working in a winery or you want to start a winery. You have to come up with a brand name, a brand identity, a brand story. And I think Jeremy did a great job last week of talking about how difficult that is in a very crowded, competitive marketplace. As I mentioned, there are over 700 wineries just in Oregon. And to put that into perspective, Oregon represents 4% of the amount of wine produced in California, our nearest neighbor, and is also much smaller than Washington State. So we're third, and we have over 700 wineries. That's at least 700 brands. Some wineries have more than one brand. They have 2 or 3 brands under their umbrella. There's a great challenge and joy in working on wine brands because on the one hand, they're usually very interesting. They usually have great stories to tell, but it's very challenging to think about the real estate that you have on a wine label of maybe 3 by 5 inches. So you're trying to tell a story in a little square of 3 to 5 inches and then have that design or that logo or that look carry over into everything else that the winery does. The market is global. Our competition is not just California and Washington. Our competition is coming from New Zealand, from South Africa, from Burgundy, from Italy. There's competition from all over the world, which is challenging, but also another huge opportunity. International marketing, international relations. The world of wine does not really have any boundaries. If you're in wine, you can be in wine in another country and have those skills and that knowledge to cross over into another country. What makes a valuable winery employee at any level, including starting level? Attitude, attitude, attitude. Give me somebody with a great attitude and I will teach you what you need to know about wine. If you walk in with an attitude and wine knowledge, you're in. I can't emphasize that enough.